What is up, everybody? Welcome to another weekend roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week on YouTube. US men's national team gets started in the Gold Cup Saturday night with a 1-1 draw against Jamaica. The result itself is not all that significant. There was historical significance in terms of losing to a CONCACAF team at home in a competitive environment, which they avoided with Brandon Vasquez's late goal. But in the grand scheme of this tournament, they could have lost this game. They would have been fine. They still might have won the group. Regardless, there's no reason they should drop a point in the next two, so they would have gone through. The stakes weren't all that high. But what matters from this game in particular, and the performance side of it, is that this is also BJ Callahan's only real opportunity in the group stage to get a good feel for how his players are going to fare in the knockout stage when you see teams like a Jamaica, like a Mexico, a Honduras, whoever it might be, Canada, etc., the better teams in this tournament. CONCACAF doesn't have the depth to test the best teams in the region in the group stage. You get maybe one opportunity against another decent opponent in your group. The U.S. had that opportunity, did not play well at all for 60 to 70 minutes. It was more than just disappointing. They were thoroughly outplayed by a Jamaica team that had 6 Premier League players starting. And then outside of that, you're talking about some MLS guys, you're talking about a couple other guys from outside of those two leagues. Of course, you got Andre Blake in net, who is much better than just a Major League Soccer goalie. That's a good Jamaica team, and a team that has been good and underachieving and just hasn't figured out how to play together. And they were really good. And you threw out a B squad. Should it have been unbalanced the way it was? No, there's a reason this U.S. team is still favored to win the tournament. There is one big important takeaway here, though, which is what I want to focus on, and really the only thing I care about coming out of this game. And that is, this game changed, and the U.S. finally started putting together a good 20-minute stretch where it was sustained pressure, eventually the goal came, and it really changed the story of the game from this was just a terrible 90 minutes to it was not a good performance overall, but there was a really bright ending. And you felt like they might even found a way to win this thing after Brandon Vasquez got that equalizer. And the lesson is very simply that come the knockout stage and the better opponents, the guys who came off the bench and attacked, Cade Cowell, Jordi Mihailovic, Christian Roldan, Brandon Vasquez, most of them, if not all of them, should be starting. Vasquez should be starting. Jesus Ferreira was not particularly impressive. If you want to start them both, fine. There's a way to play Ferreira underneath. But Vasquez, I don't know what he has to do to get a real chance in this team at this point. I'm also a huge Jordi Mihailovic guy. I talked about this with the World Cup roster. You saw what he could do. To me, he's got to be the 10. Alan Sonora did not have a good game at all. I don't need to see any more of that to know how I feel. Jordi Mihailovic and or Jesus Ferreira should be playing in the number 10 spot for this team. And Christian Roldan had some really good moments, nearly got a goal. Cade Cowell was dangerous, not as impressive as the other guys. But if I'm BJ Callahan, I saw what I needed to see. I don't care how the rest of the group stage plays out in terms of you can rotate your squad because those are games, whoever's out there, you should win comfortably. But I know who I'm starting, and I'm not changing my mind about that. Maybe you have a decision or two to make. For example, whether you give Jordan Morris another shot instead of Cade Cowell on the left wing. But I want Roldan, Vasquez, Mihailovic in a starting lineup in the knockout stage. This was the one valuable piece of information, the one data set, the singular data set that actually means something in the group stage. And that starting attack did very, very little. That starting lineup conceded the goal off a set piece and conceded the penalty. And if you want to play Christian Roldan, I know he plays primarily on the wing for this team, but if you want to play him in midfield instead of Aiden Morris to get more attackers there, I'm all for that too. Wherever he plays, I don't really care. He just needs to be in the starting lineup. The the discrepancy, the change that happened when those guys came in was incredible. And to me, there is no way to rewrite that narrative until you get to the knockout stage. And so you've got to trust the guys who delivered in the game against the high level opponent in your group that you potentially could see again. And so to me, there's no need to overreact about a B squad that hasn't been together really, that's kind of putting all these pieces in from different spots against a team that, there were 6 Premier League players out there. None of them playing for the U.S. The lesson here, though, is it's clear based on form and just the way things are going who needs to be out there and attack. Question is whether BJ Callahan is going to take that lesson and run with it, and we're not going to know until the group stage. It's hard to criticize the lineup because you didn't know what you were going to get. But now that you saw how all of these guys performed, it's time to make the change when these games matter if you're serious about winning this trophy, and the U.S. is, as is everybody. They're not winning this trophy with that starting lineup. Jamaica was the better team over 90 minutes. I still do believe that the best team in this tournament is a collection of U.S. players, in the sense that if they play their best and get the best 11 guys from that squad out there, they're the best team in this tournament. But that was not what you saw in this game. That was abundantly clear. So that's my one takeaway. I don't like drawing big conclusions about a bunch of players that at the very most are borderline in a 26-man World Cup squad. Right? This is very much a B team. And so I'm keeping my focus on this tournament and how to maximize the squad that was selected. And to me, that means you're overhauling the attack because it just simply was not good enough against Jamaica. You got the point, so you feel really good about your chances of getting out of the group. They would have been fine anyway, but all of a sudden, if you lose that one game, you put yourself in danger of some bizarre result happening, and all of a sudden you didn't even get out of your group. Making sure Jamaica only has a point and getting a point on the board, they should be just fine. The question is, can they look much more impressive in the group stage? Because that was not a good start at all. The other thing I want to mention, DC United beat a admittedly depleted, but still very good FC Cincinnati team in MLS play. Obviously, Matt Miazga is playing with the U.S., not with Cincinnati right now. They were missing some guys, but Lucho Acosta was there. Brandon Vasquez obviously also with the U.S. They had enough players, though. It was a 3-0 win, and it probably should have been more like 4 or 5. And I just bring this up because I want to talk about Wayne Rooney for a second. I said this when DC hired him, that he wasn't getting enough credit for the job he did at Derby County. Go look at where they were when he started. Look at how he managed to kind of turn things around and save them from getting relegated the first season. And then still didn't even finish bottom of the league despite a 21-point deduction. He did a really, really good job at Derby. And then it got to the point where he just wasn't going to continue doing that with all the questions about ownership and money and the disaster that Derby County was. And so he comes to DC United. And they're not a great MLS team. I mean, they're right there, fighting for a playoff spot. But I have been so impressed with the way they play and how well drilled and clear they are about what they are trying to do. And that's built around Christian Benteke, obviously, with your wingers and your wide guys, your Taxi Funtases, your Matthias Klicks, kind of running in behind, getting involved when Benteke holds the ball up. It just works. That's still not a roster that blows you away talent-wise. But they're significantly better than they have been the past few seasons. They are fun to watch. They're winning games. They can do that to the best team in the league, what they did on Saturday. And you look at what Wayne Rooney's body of work is compared to Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard. And I was kind of on board with Gerrard coming off of Rangers because I felt like he did some of what I'm going to talk about here with Rooney. And I still feel that way. It is one thing to, and it's not easy. It takes a good coach to get the most out of a talented group of players. That's what Frank Lampard did that first season at Chelsea. Right? The transfer ban, all those young guys got him into the Champions League. That was a good coaching job. Since then, it's been bad. Competent coaches can do that part when they're given the resources. Which is also where it gets interesting with Gerrard at Rangers because he seemed to do something they haven't been able to do on either side of him. And also, obviously, you're playing a lot of teams that you are much better than. But he still stopped Celtic. And that's got to count for something. But he gets to Aston Villa, can't elevate that team. If anything, they went backwards under him. And you see Unai Emery come in with the same group of players, and what does he do? He has elevated them. And that is what Wayne Rooney has done both at Derby County and DC United. Good managers know how to get the most out of their team. They do what they're supposed to. Jesse Marsch did what he was supposed to at Leeds. He didn't overachieve, he didn't underachieve. I will always support the people, the coaches, and believe they should get a chance at the higher level when they overachieve. Graham Potter at Brighton, although that's got a whole nother context with what Roberto De Zerbi is doing. This is my entire theory why I keep talking about Eddie Howe at Bournemouth. They had no business being that good in attack and that high up in the Premier League table and so safe, comfortable in the Premier League for that long. Sean Dyche at Burnley. No business being that comfortable qualifying for Europe, all of that stuff, year after year. Those managers elevated those teams. They didn't just get what was expected out of them, which is hard enough. They got way more than was expected. Wayne Rooney is doing that. And it's easy to kind of get glossed over because he's not managing great teams. And so he's not going to get the same kind of credit as, for example, I'm not that Pat Noonan is being overhyped, because Pat Noonan is doing a phenomenal job. But you just think about the guy he was coaching against on Saturday. That's an awfully good Cincinnati team backed by a lot of money that's been poured into it. Since they got Miazga and figured out the defense, they've been sensational. And maybe they've even overachieved a little bit. Because I will argue that Pat Noonan has elevated them slightly. But it's easy to look at the guy in Pat Noonan's spot with all of those great players and say, of course he's doing a great job. I want, more than anything else, the first thing I look at is, can you actually elevate a team? Because to me, that's the hardest thing to do. And that is what, now it's early, it's at lower levels. Wayne Rooney still has plenty to prove as a manager. And let's see how the rest of the season with DC goes. All I know is they are significantly better today than they were when they hired him. And that's a credit to Wayne Rooney. And as a lot of his kind of contemporaries have their stock fall and fall and fall as managers, all those guys he was playing against and playing with for England, the Lampards, the Gerrards, to me, Rooney's stock continues to go up. He can coach. He can manage. He knows exactly what he wants, and you see it on the field every week with DC. So I wanted to give him his props. I'm becoming real impressed and thinking he's going to be kind of one of the managers I start going to bat for here if he keeps this up. So I wanted to mention that and recognize what DC did. That was the story of MLS this weekend. And then, of course, U.S. men's national team getting going in the Gold Cup. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.